Well, good morning, everyone. It is a joy to be able to share in service with you in this way today. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and for saying my last name correctly. Appreciate it. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to connect with y'all and tune in from Corpus Christi through the wonders of the technological world. And of course, it would be much better to be able to be there in person with you. One day I will make the trip over so that I can meet each of you face to face. But if Zoom and Unity has taught me anything, it's that connection is not about proximity, it's about presence. And also reminding myself that making eye contact with through a webcam is also a form of its own spiritual practice. So, speaking of presence, this morning's daily word reminds us that I am fully awake and fully present to life. So, to be awake is to be aware, to consciously choose how we engage with the world rather than just merely reacting to it. But let's be honest, some days that's easier said than done. Yeah. Anybody else out there feel like the world's in some kind of a competition just to see how chaotic it can get? Whew. I mean, every day seems like there's another wave. We have an information overload. We're dealing with environmental crises, racial injustices in general, right? We got war happening on our planet in 2025. There's division, there's scandals, there's AI integration everywhere that we look. And of course, the occasional existential threat just to kind of keep everybody on their toes, keep things interesting. So it comes as no surprise that we live in a world that seems designed to keep us in a state of high stress, high fear, high anxiety, and negativity. So, how do we navigate this madness? How do we shift from the weight of witnessing everything that we are witnessing within the world and also the weight of what we're dealing with within our own personal lives, right? Maybe a health challenge or, some of the disappointments, the uncertainty and the loss that we often experience in this human journey. How do we shift from the weight of that into a state of true positivity? And by meaning true positivity, I don't mean some sort of forced optimism that ignores reality and ignores the challenges we face, but rather a sense of a deep, unshakable faith that allows us and gives us the ability to see beyond the storm, to see beyond what is currently in our faces, and to recognize and to trust that deep within us, calm waters are indeed present and available to us right here and right now. So, thankfully, through teachers, many wonderful teachers that have come before me and us, and through Unity's positive path to spiritual living, we are provided with plenty of tools, plenty of practices, and principles to help guide us on this path. And some of you may know that I am learning these tools and practices as I am taking the spiritual education and enrichment classes provided by Unity in Flower Bluff, Unity by the Sea. And I wanted to just share some of what I am learning with you today because I really feel like that's what this journey is about. We're all walking each other home, as Ram Dass has said. And whenever we feel that there is something that has caused us to maybe grow a little bit more or that we are inspired by, I feel that it is our duty to share. So, one of the books that we have studied in the spiritual education and enrichment classes is one that we've returned to quite often. And I'm so grateful because it truly is one of my favorites, if not my favorite one that we've read so far. And that is Eric Butterworth's Discover the Power Within You. I'm not sure if any of y'all have read it. If not, I highly recommend putting it on your repertoire of books to read. And in this book, and really in the messages that he came and taught, Eric Butterworth, he explores the deeper meanings of Jesus's teachings. And Butterworth, for any of you who may not know, he was a Unity minister for maybe over 50 years, and he really had such a gift of guiding people beyond the programming of religious dogma into a realization an intimate realization of awakening to our own divine potential. And he really emphasized, just as unity does, that Jesus did not come to impose religious rules upon us, but to awaken us to a way of being, to a higher state of consciousness. And so today I want to share his perspective with you on Jesus's Sermon on the Mount, most specifically the Beatitudes. And I want to share them not as rules to follow, as they are so often taught in the realm of religious programming, but rather as a transformative way of being that leads us to greater strength and resilience, to greater clarity, to greater peace and positivity. Eric Butterworth was often quoted by saying, "Man is not in the world to set it right, but to see it rightly." And it is this shift in perception that is at the heart of the Beatitudes. So we're going to dive into each one of them today. Let me go ahead and share my screen with y'all. All righty. I think we're coming up nice and clear there. So our first beatitude is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So this has been and still is often misinterpreted as some sort of a virtue to be poor. But poor in spirit, metaphysically interpreted, actually means those who have denied personal consciousness. They are poor in the spirit of selfishness, but rich in the spirit of Christ. So Butterworth interprets poor in spirit as those who are open and receptive and willing to renounce preconceived ideas. He says, "Blessed are those who can let go of the attempt to understand intellectually, who accept the deep things of the Spirit as a little child." So, what does that mean for us in a practical sense? If being poor in spirit is not about a lack, but about an openness, then it invites us to release. To release what? To release our personal will, to release the excessive mental load and baggage that we often carry, and our attachment to how we think that things should be. It calls us to trade rigidity for receptivity and to trust that there is a higher wisdom at work in our lives. And this isn't always easy, right? Because our egos really like control. They like certainty and they like knowing the answers. But when we practice, right? And this is what this journey is about. When we practice letting go, when we practice surrendering to our grip that holds on and we allow divine guidance to flow freely through us, we naturally create space for something greater to unfold. And now, after each of these explanations of the Beatitude, he offers us, Eric Butterworth, an affirmation to practice. As he says, the Beatitudes are be attitudes, right? They are attitudes of being. So I'd like to go ahead and invite you to, I will go ahead and recite the affirmation, and then if all of y'all, if it's in alignment with your beliefs and you'd like to go ahead and express those beautiful voices and to fill that beautiful space with all of your high, powerful vibrations, please go ahead and recite the affirmations after me. So our first attitude of being is, "I am open and receptive to the inflow and the outpouring of all that is and God." And one thing I do want to say, I can't see all of y'all there, okay? But I want to pay attention to, there was a woman, her name was Louise Hay, and she was, I call her the queen of positive affirmations. And she would tell us that in a lot of her seminars and her workshops, she would say these beautiful affirmations. And then she'd notice when people are saying, "I'm open and receptive," and they're like this, or their legs are crossed, right? And so I would like to invite everybody now to uncross your legs, uncross your arms, maybe even taking a nice, deep, full breath, and just allowing yourself to settle into this moment. And when you are ready, please go ahead and recite this first attitude of being. Right. I'm going to assume y'all are done because I can't hear you. So moving on to our second beatitude. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So to mourn metaphysically means to acknowledge the passing of old ways of thinking and being and to choose to move forward. So mourning is not necessarily a state of despair, but rather it is an opening to deeper compassion, to deeper healing, and to divine comfort. Eric Butterworth says, Jesus is not saying that it is necessary for man to sorrow or to experience tragedies. For there can be no sorrow or sense of tragedy to one who understands the dynamics of his own divinity. He says Jesus is telling us that there are two ways by which we can come into the knowledge of the truth and to experience the releasement of our own inner divine power. The first way is that we can be poor in spirit, right? That first beatitude, and simply let go instantly with the receptivity of a little child and let our Christ self express. Or this is usually what I see mostly what we choose here on this human journey. We can resist the truth of our divinity until our lives are devastated by the fruits of wrong thinking, such as sickness, sorrow, and failure. And then in these experiences, he says, we may find our self-will broken down and replaced by a new desire to reach for the absolute truth of God. So in essence, Jesus is saying, the man who sorrows is fortunate, for in his sorrow, he may come to experience God's presence within his life. So we can see that mourning is about being present, right? It's about being present with all the emotions and not avoiding them, right? Spiritual truth and spiritual growth is all about shining that light on those shadowy aspects of ourselves, right? It leaves nothing untouched. So it calls us to face our grief, to face our disappointment, to face the unforgiveness or any regrets. But it calls us to face them, not to wallow in them, but to transform them. So when we allow ourselves the gift of truly feeling, as uncomfortable as it may be, and in each moment to the best of our ability, without resistance, we make space for spirit to comfort and to transform us. We're going to move on to our second attitude of being. I am comforted by the divine presence within me, and I embrace life with an open heart. Oh, I wish I could hear all of y'all. All right, moving on to our third beatitude. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, meekness is often associated and misinterpreted as weakness, right? I mean, it rhymes, meekness, weakness, right? But the metaphysical meaning of meek actually means anyone highly trained to react to negative stimuli with love instead of an eye for an eye. So true meekness is spiritual strength in action. Eric Butterworth says meekness is a sensitiveness or a surrender of consciousness to the influence of God. He says Jesus is not talking about meekness as an approach to people. He's referring to an attitude toward God. Jesus was meek toward God. He knew that I of myself can do nothing. And he recognized that he was just a simple carpenter's son who had found his spiritual unity with God. And in this discovery, he tapped the secrets of the universe. But he knew that the miracle working power that was now his came not to him, but through him. And as long as he was in tune, he could do all things. So when we practice meekness toward God, we recognize God's power within us. And then we are transformed. We begin to respond with more love, more understanding, more empathy and compassion, rather than reactivity to any negative stimuli we experience. And this brings us to our third attitude of being. I am in tune with God. That which is God inspired and God directed shall prevail. Now it's your turn. Moving on to our fourth beatitude. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now, this was kind of mind-blowing to me, and it was one of these things that really like stuck out to me as I was raised Catholic, and a lot of the religious programming kind of, you think a word means a certain thing, right? But his interpretation, Butterworth's interpretation of righteousness, simply means right thinking. I mean, who knew, right? Really transforms the meaning there. So he says that Jesus deals with attitudes and not platitudes. It is the right attitude that makes the successful man. It is right attitudes that make and sustain good health. It is right attitudes that enable a person to overcome alcohol or smoking or overeating. No matter what your need, you can be transformed by the renewal of your mind. A right attitude is the key to any desired good. He then says, but Jesus is saying, you must be hungry. So you may desire healing and you may be affirming life and wholeness for yourself, but you must hunger and thirst for health, meaning you must want it to the exclusion of all else. You must want it enough to let go of your feelings of self-pity and the satisfaction that comes through the sympathy and the attention of others. So we must hunger and thirst for truth with such a deep commitment that it reshapes our priorities. The more that we center our lives on truth, the more that we see truth operating in our lives. It is a law of consciousness. That which we hunger for, we inevitably experience. This brings us to our fourth attitude of being. I seek with all my mind and heart, and I shall find. Your turn. And on to our fifth beatitude. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Truth unity defines mercy as a Christ-like treatment toward the suffering. It is a state of being compassionate, forgiving, and kind. It is an active expression of love in the face of human struggle. Now, this is a hard concept for many of us to grasp because the majority of the world is not taught that life mirrors and reflects our inner state. I know I was definitely not taught that. We are rather conditioned to believe that our experiences shape us, that external circumstances dictate our emotions, and that peace and happiness and fulfillment are things to be attained rather than realized from within. But spiritual truth tells us the opposite, yes? And that is that we live from the inside out. And this principle is reflected in everything around us. So take a cell, for example, right? It begins with the nucleus where the DNA is located, and the information inside of this nucleus dictates how the cell is formed, how it behaves, how it functions, and how it interacts with its environment. So the same principle applies to, let's use something a little bit more that, common that we see. Let's take an apple. Its seeds that are grown from its core define the shape, the nature, and the color of the fruit. So an apple seed is not going to turn into an orange, right? Unless nowadays with genetic modifications, we don't well, anything is possible. But our inner thoughts, right? Our inner thoughts and our emotions and our intentions really truly work in the same way, influencing the external world that we experience. And Eric Butterworth said, as long as you have an enemy, right? Someone with which to blame and place judgment on that ignites all those uncomfortable feelings within, as long as you have an enemy, you also have enmity. So, in other words, the conflict that we see outside of us is often a reflection of what we are holding on to within ourselves. So, if we carry resentment and we carry fear and unforgiveness or judgment, we will continue to see and encounter those very experiences in the world that we encounter, right? In the things that we see in the world, in the relationships that we form within our lives. But Jesus showed us another way. When Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," he exemplified the highest form of mercy. He recognized that it is often ignorance and fear that are guiding people's actions and behaviors. And so true mercy calls us to rise above judgment and to extend grace. And it's not because other people necessarily earned it, right? Because let's be honest, some people make some really poor choices. But it is because our inner peace and the evolution of our own consciousness and the evolution of humanity literally depends upon it. Now, this brings us to our fifth attitude of being. I keep my thoughts centered upon only those things that I want to see manifest in my life. Your turn. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Our sixth beatitude. Now, purity of heart, metaphysically interpreted, means those who are completely free from all anxiety, resentment, selfishness, lust, and any other form that opposes Christ-like thought and feeling. Eric Butterworth says, lift up your eyes and get your thoughts centered on the good, on the true, and on the beautiful, and you will see God. He says, but this requires discipline of thought, for one does not easily see beauty in ugliness, life in sickness, or abundance in poverty. So this means that we must prioritize being present with God within us, the one true source of heart purity. So this can be achieved by making time for meditation, quieting the mind, for practicing being in the stillness, for simplifying the distractions within our lives, and practicing some of the tools that Unity offers us, right? Practicing active denials and affirmations that keep our eyes lifted to pure thinking and to perceiving. This brings us to our sixth attitude of being. I see the world not as it is, but as I am, and I am in spiritual unity with God. Your turn. Hmm. Can't hear it, but I feel it. On to our seventh. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Truth Unity defines a peacemaker as one who has the ability to say peace to the turbulent waves of thought and to have them obey. A peacemaker is one who reduces to peace and harmony all the thoughts of strife, anger, and retaliation in his own mind. Eric Butterworth says, the peace that we desire and that we need in the world is that which passeth understanding. It cannot come by treaties or agreements or by wars and boundary lines. Peace can only come when men become receptive to it and become peacemakers in the process of expressing it from within. He says peacemakers are not only called the children of God, that is the result. The first step is that we must call ourselves the children of God. We must recognize this divine presence within us and act from it. He says this calls for much meditation and scientific prayer, the diligent conditioning of the mind to the accepting and the releasement of the dynamic God potential within us. So, in other words, we cannot be instruments of peace if we are at war within ourselves. This spiritual growth is about deep, deep honesty, right? Know thyself. So, the more that we cultivate peace through practicing maybe these attitudes of being and utilizing the practices that unity offers us on the path, the more that we cultivate and the more that we radiate it outward, the more that we begin to transform not only our minds, but our relationships, and it ripples outward into our communities and inevitably out into the world. And this brings us to our seventh attitude of being. I am a divine expression of God, and I act like one. I am a radiating center of peace and love. Your turn. Moving on to our eighth and final beatitude. This one's a bit of a longer one, but I had only put this right here because it's a little bit long. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall reproach you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets that were before you. Now, persecution, metaphysically interpreted, is the resistance within ourselves when we strive for spiritual growth. It's the challenges that we face when we are moving away from limiting beliefs toward greater understanding, right? That's why change is so dang uncomfortable. Eric Butterworth says, the persecution takes place within our own mind, and the persecutor is an errant thought of our own mind. Whenever you set a course of righteousness, or do you remember what righteousness means? Right thinking, right? Whenever you begin to think rightly, right, in alignment with spiritual truth, when you begin a program of spiritual discipline and self-restraint, he says you will invariably run into the cross currents of your own static thoughts. In physics, to move something that is still or to stop something that is in motion, you must overcome inertia. The inertial force holds the thing in rest or in motion until it is acted upon by an external force. He says there is a kind of mental inertia that resists any change. For even the effort to improve your life will necessitate coming to grips with the states of mind that have directed the kind of life that you are now experiencing. Jesus experienced the challenge of mental inertia in the account of his struggle with Satan in the wilderness. And he says this, and I love this line. What is temptation but the inertial pull of limited states of consciousness, resisting the upward reach of man's higher aspiration? He says, when Jesus says, blessed are they that have been persecuted for righteousness' sake, he is saying there is nothing wrong with being tempted within yourself. It is a sign that you are growing. You are reaching for greater things, even if the human self is pulling to keep you in lower things. Wherever there is temptation, there is aspiration. Wherever there is a conscience over human weakness, there is evidence of an awakening divinity. Jesus is saying, don't worry about these slings and arrows of human consciousness that are pulling against you. And by all means, and this is a big one, don't fight it. You are blessed because the persecution represents the first reaction to the external force. And that force, which is everything else, is of divine origin. He says, press on past the inertial pull of your humanity to the releasement of your divinity. For what is divinity really? The true meaning is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. Who knew? So spiritual growth requires tremendous courage to stand firm in truth, even when it feels like external forces oppose us. Walking a spiritual path means choosing love when fear is louder. It means standing firm in faith when uncertainty arises and moving with truth, even when it feels easier to follow the crowd, to follow the program. So, this beatitude reminds us that living in alignment with divine principle may not always be met with acceptance, but we are never alone. We are supported by something far greater than any source of external validation. And above all else, this beatitude reminds us that the kingdom of heaven is not a distant reward that we get when we croak. It is a consciousness, a state of consciousness that is available to us right now. And this brings us to our eighth attitude of being. I walk in truth, grounded in the kingdom of heaven within me. So, thank you all for practicing that with me. I hope you're feeling the vibrations of your own power filling the space. As we can see and as we know, we're all walking it. This human journey can be challenging. But as we live these attitudes, we begin to transform not just our experience, but the world around us. And so may we look at these attitudes of being as a divine blueprint, a call to awaken us to the truth of who we are and why we came. For when we embody humility, we open ourselves to something greater. When we allow ourselves to mourn, we create space for healing and for divine comfort and deeper love. When we embrace gentleness, ironically, we stand in our true power. When we seek truth and righteousness through the transforming of our minds, we are filled in ways that the world cannot provide. When we extend mercy, we allow divine love to flow through us. When we cultivate purity of heart, we begin to see the sacred in all things. And when we become the peacemakers, we begin to reveal our divine nature and purpose in the world. And when we stand in truth, even and especially when it is difficult, we live in the consciousness of the kingdom here and now. This invitation of the Beatitudes is really a call to be the presence of God in the world, to be the hands, to be the feet, to be the eyes, to be the voices. To remember that in this journey and on this journey, on this path we're all walking, each moment presents us with an opportunity to return to love, to return to peace, and to return to truth. So let us take a moment now to begin to anchor these truths within us through the power of our breath, through the power of awareness, and through sacred stillness, where we can begin to allow these words not just to be heard, but to be felt, where they can settle in and move beyond concept and settle into a state, into our being. So if it is in your practice today to close your eyes, please feel free to do so. If not, you can rest your gaze and fixate it upon a spot in front of you. Begin by taking a nice deep breath. And sit up tall, making sure that the crown of your head is reaching up long, elongating your spine. And you're grounding through your sit bones, allowing you to rise up, but also to root down, connecting to earth and to the universe. Take a few more deep breaths here, breathing in fully and deeply, and exhaling slowly and completely. With each breath, see if you can release any tension from your jaw, from the spot in between your eyebrows. Allow the tongue to drop away from the roof of your mouth. Allow your shoulders to drop down away from your ears. Allow your chest to relax. Allow your belly to just let go. Allow your hips to feel grounded, your legs and your feet to feel supported by the earth holding you. As you breathe, feel yourself softening, surrendering, and opening to this beautiful presence of the divine within you. Now silently affirm to yourself, I walk in humility and grace. I allow love to guide my decisions. I move gently, yet powerfully through the world. I seek truth, and I am filled. I extend mercy, and I receive it in return. I see the sacred in all things. I choose peace, and in doing so, I reveal my divine nature. I stand and walk in truth. I am grounded in the kingdom of heaven on earth. Feel the resonance of these words within you. Please know that you carry this wisdom forward. Know that you carry it not just in thought, but in presence, in action, and in being. Let us sit here for a moment in the stillness, simply breathing, simply being. Begin to deepen your breath. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Before you open your eyes, just begin to extend your awareness outside of you to the people that surround you, to the walls that are surrounding you. Bringing your awareness back into the room. Begin to gently wiggle your fingers and your toes. Maybe allow a gentle smile to come across your face. And when it feels right, begin to open your eyes. May I remind you that you are blessed, you are loved, and you are the light of the world. Thank you so very much. Namaskar.